Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Processing Severance. I'm Rasha G, and I'm joined today by my fellow Lumon team members. First up, Rob L.
Rasha G, I'm so excited to be back, and I promise you that I am not a fetid muppet.
I hope not. Mike M.
Hey everyone, I'm Mike M, and if I were a door, I'd be a triple panel door with a semi-gloss finish because that's hot, apparently.
Shadan L.
Hi everyone, I'm Shadan L. Am I an innie? Am I an outie? Where am I? I still don't know, but I'm happy to be here with you guys.
And we're also excited because Lumon is always expanding, and today we have a new recruit, Dana HK.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me from 5X.
It is great to have you. Thank you, everyone, for your introduction today. We have a great episode planned. So, before we start, again, we are talking about episode 2, season 2. And listen, if you haven't watched the episode yet, then I suggest you go back and come back because there are going to be some spoilers. I also want to take a moment and thank everyone who watched or listened to the show last week. We're so excited to give a shout out to those of you who wrote into us. And if you do want to write in, you can always comment or write into us at processingseverance@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment on our YouTube channel. Here are the two people we want to give a shout out to. First one is Michael Lieberwitz. In the first episode, they say that 5 months have passed since Mark's return to Lumon, but I believe that's a lie. Do you feel that way? So, my Lumon team members, does anybody want to comment or share what do you all think?
I just took it on board as okay, but why should we take it on board? We shouldn't be taking anything they give us on board. We should be like questioning everything. And so now I thank you so much, Michael. Now I'm questioning it.
Yes. I was already confused, so I'm a little bit more confused if anybody else wants to add to this.
I think we definitely saw with the episode that we're about to discuss that it is all lies. And it's interesting. I want to dive into that. I can't wait to dive into that, but that is just creepy to me, honestly, lying about this sort of thing. So we have an answer.
There you go. Well, Michael, stay tuned and keep commenting and watching. So I'd love to hear what else you have to say. Also, Bethany Howard. Bethany says all the characters seem similar to season 1, but there's something off about Helly, which I think we all kind of had discussed too. Do you think Helly in this episode is an innie or outie? And I personally think she's an outie, but how does she not transfer over when? So Dana or Shadan, do either of you have a comment about this?
Yeah, I mean, kudos to Britt Lauer, especially in this episode we're about to discuss for being so good at playing that cold-hearted outie version of her. I also agree that I think she is very conscious when she is in there, or at least part of her. You know, she's getting that VIP, like, in-house treatment of Severed.
I felt that way too. I think especially after watching episode 1, I was a little bit on the fence of, wait, is this character really, is the outie kind of playing into it? And we'll get into more of episode 2, but there was something happening with the videos that she was watching on the playback. Shadan, did you have something to add on that?
Well, there's so much. Come back.
All right. Well, so we are now officially going to start the episode recap. I want to again give a shout out to Bethany and Michael. And to anybody who's watching, please do leave your comments. We all would love to hear from you. Tell us about your theories, what you're enjoying, not enjoying, and don't forget to email us. All right. Initial thoughts. You know, this episode was so heavy packed with so many things. I will come back and share my thoughts, but let's jump right into it. Shadan, I will start with you. What were some of your initial thoughts on this episode?
Well, okay, first of all, I have to ask you guys this because I felt like this was one of the creepiest episodes, or I should say, I felt so uneasy and like eerie, this sort of eerie sense of dread the whole time watching. And I don't think I've had that feeling watching this before. It felt kind of like suffocating and claustrophobic to me at times, which I thought was a really interesting emotion to evoke. And yeah, there was a lot of questions. You know, speaking of Helly, I put this in our notes, but there's a moment where they tell her, like, okay, we need Heliar to complete the project. And there's this like expression that crosses over her face of like disgust or like horror, and she sort of has these moments through the episodes where she's sort of like looking down upon the the innies, and she's like very condescending to them, which I thought was interesting. Almost like she doesn't even view them as like fellow human beings. I mean, clearly I don't think she does, so I thought that was an interesting sort of dynamic to add into it. There's so
Wait,
much.
before you go on, I want to jump in really quick.
Mm.
You talked about feeling claustrophobic. So what I kind of noticed through this episode, and I'd love, if anyone wants to chime in too, were the use of colors, the way it was filmed lighting wise, and even the camera angles. I think that helped kind of contribute to that claustrophobic, dark, eerie feeling. I really this time noticed the colors, how it's not colorful at all. And that's why I wanted to throw in some red today. But I thought, wow, it really impacts how I feel about the characters and just the feeling of the entire episode. And then Mark S. I'll share my points later, but yeah, we're starting to see these character, I think, nuances even more.
Well, speaking of theories, can we talk about blue? I mean, Rob, you're wearing blue. What is the deal with so much blue? Like, does it mean something? Like, obviously, like Lumen's marketing is blue, but like, is there a larger sort of symbolism that I'm missing here? Is there something we're gonna find out later? Like this episode in particular is just blue and gray, and what does that mean?
Yeah, what does it mean? Does it signify coldness, remoteness, or does it signify something peaceful? I don't know, but I feel like I was in an episode of Ozark. It was very blue. Oh, you're right. That's so perceptive, Shadan. And I'm just thinking, I felt very uneasy as well. It was darker. The camera angles, as Rasha mentioned, were a bit off kilter. And a lot of shows do that to play with your perception. And nothing on this show is not intentional, is accidental. Everything's intentional. So I guess we have to wait and see. But I really have no clue as to why this episode aesthetically looked and sounded and felt different to episode 1, apart from the fact that we were outside as opposed to inside.
And Rob, did you have any initial thoughts? Because I'd love to hear from Dana, you and Mike too, on some of the thoughts you had when you were watching this episode.
Yeah, I guess all I wanted to add to what Shadan's saying is I love that episode 1 obviously is about the innies perspective. Episode 2 is from the outies perspective. And yet again, this episode ends about a question about Gemma or Miss Casey. That's really how it ends. And so we keep getting that reminder that this is a very, very important linchpin type narrative arc that we will hopefully get some clarity on as the episodes progress.
Dana, I'm going to jump over to you. What were your initial thoughts in watching this episode? And welcome again to the Lumon team.
Thank you. I think for me, this episode does such a spectacular job at capturing the performative nature of corporate entities and just the hollowness and the blankness there. Like I put this in the notes too. One of my favorite things that comes from, Patricia Arquette's character is we're going back to, she said, oh, they convinced you to stay? Was a pineapple involved? And I'm like, that's all it takes. When we're at the door factory, he asked about benefits and the guy goes, we have a coffee maker, And so I think they do such a good job of translating the hollowness of like the corporate world we kind of live in now into the world of Severance and, capturing it in their own branded way and also making it feel like relatable to us. I'm like, yeah, that is something that somebody would say at a job interview. It's really disconcerting.
And that's maybe where the blue falls in too, because whenever I see blue, like this kind of a blue, I do think corporate. So I think there's something that they're tapping into. Mike, what were some of your initial feels for this one?
First off, we're off to a really good start with season 2 because I think the pacing is just on top of things. We had so many questions coming out of season 1 because we had an innies only episode. There's so much about the world that we don't know is happening because we've only seen things from the perspective of the Lumon severed floor. And now that we're coming out and getting an outies point of view on things and an outie only point of view on things, we get answers about timing. We get answers about how things kind of progressed after the innies kind of took over these bodies, in the season finale. And I love that the show is not waiting around to tell us a lot of what our questions, to answer what our questions were from the season finale. It's really kind of just creepy, like I said, that Lumon lied about all this And to really kind of respond to both Dana and Shadan's notes about the blue color, I think those are kind of tied together. The hollowness that Dana was talking about and the blueness of the episode, I think that's what that signifies. I associate blue with depression and a lot of just feeling blah, and I think that we're seeing that in the daily lives of Mark S and Irv and Helly and Dylan. And there's this sharp contrast between what we saw here with those muted colors and then things in the first episode, like the greens of the hallway and the whites of the hallway, the red ball, the vibrant blue balloons that had Mark's face on it, all of that stuff. So yeah, I think that there's definitely a difference between how they're treating innies as kind of kids with playful colors and everything like that in the office space, and then how this mature adult, sad kind of existence is in the outer world. So yeah, there's so much to deconstruct here. I can't wait to get deeper into every nook and cranny of this one.
I need to get my eyes checked because I did not notice as much color theory on this one as the others. But I do, Mike, I'm going to respectfully disagree with you in that I feel like every episode, I have more questions that I get answered at every point, like from this, and I'm glad we got to meet the Audis in this one, because I think if we'd gone another one without seeing what had happened to them, I think we would have been, crawling up the walls or whatever it was. But I have so many more questions after seeing this than I do even the first episode. And I don't feel like I have answers, except for maybe like, where is, the neighbor, Miss Cobell, that's about it. But I'm like, what is Cold Harbor? Y'all been talking about cold and blue. What is Cold Harbor?
And I was going to bring that up. So I'm glad you said that was one of the first things, because they just casually mentioned it. And then we didn't hear anything else about it. No discussion. So I'm thinking it's some secret underground project. But I feel like they're going to do something bad to all of these innies later. Now, I don't know what that looks like or what that represents or means, but it seems like it's a pretty heavy investigative project.
Something could be military. I mean, who knows? One thing that really occurred to me about episode 2, I'm just kind of jumping around a little, I apologize for that, is that Jen Tullett's character, what's her name in the show? The sister, Devon.
Devon.
I feel like she's starting to be pushed forward as one of the main characters of the show, because I feel that she's not going to let go of what she witnessed when her brother was unsevered for that period of time. And she's going to push quite hard, I think, on what's going on with Gemma, because there's a disconnect there. And I'm really looking forward to that. I think it's a great character, a great actress. And so maybe they're giving us a few breadcrumbs that she's going to end up being quite important. Particularly, she's also married to the genius author that they all think that her husband is.
I'm so glad you bring this up, Rob, because in the first season, first of all, their brother-sister dynamic between Mark and Devon is so interesting to see unfold. And in the first season, I really bought into, like, she's a concerned sister, she really cares for him, all of these things. But now, when I was reading your notes, I'm starting to doubt how sincere she is. Like, is there an alternate motive of her asking all these questions and pushing? Like, is it concern, or is there something deeper? And I know, Rasha, like, to get into our favorite scenes from the episode, I think the key scene from episode 2 is sort of the scene where Devon, Rickon, and Mark are discussing sort of everything that's happening post any Audis sort of switch over, and they Rickon immediately says to Mark, "Oh, you made the comment you made because you were concerned about the baby. You were talking about the baby," and sort of they plant that seed in his head right away. And Rickon says, "Oh, they loved my book. They were inspired by my book," which I thought was so fascinating. This idea of like propaganda, and like, of course they loved your book because that's the only thing they've read, so they're going to be inspired by it because they don't have access to anything else. I thought that was such an interesting sort of commentary there. And then Rebecca comes to the door and says, "Don't punish the baby, it's not their fault. Why would he punish the baby?" Like, there's so many questions that were raised out of this scene for me. And again, sort of the relationship dynamics, and like Rickon, like, what is going on with this guy? And Devon, does she
Well, Rickon wants to be a star. I mean, I just feel like he is so invested in his book right now and making sure he's that author who gets everything out. But I want to bring up something where I have different opinions about the sister brother duo, because I do feel there's something that's self-profiteering there, but I do genuinely feel that there's a concern. Like the scene that they had when they went out to dinner, I know he was really offended or got very upset about discussing Gemma's death, but I felt as a sister, she kind of was expressing her concern, unless I'm completely gullible at this point. Like there was that concern of being that sister-in-law who was mourning the death of her brother's wife. I don't know. So I felt there is some love there.
I agree that there's a lot of love there. I mean, when Milchek comes to their home, and she immediately is skeptical of him and goes like, "Are you going to punish my brother's innie because of what he did?" I mean, like, she's clearly never been a fan of the Severance program. We've known this about her from the beginning. And I think that comes from everything that, she suspects might be happening with her brother that she really does not know anything about. So I think that there is a lot of love there, but she also just doesn't really know how to, approach this situation, because she literally doesn't know what's going on at Lumon or anything like that. And she's just trying to be supportive, I think.
I do think she is, I'm sorry, just to say really quick, I do think she is genuinely concerned about her brother. I just wonder if we're setting up a scenario where she maybe have to choose between her husband and her brother at some point, or if her allegiances will be tested at some point, and that's sort of the seed that we've been planted in this episode.
I think one of the most important takeaways for me is that Lumon considers her a threat. They call her more of a nuisance or whatever it is that they refer to her as, but like she's on their radar, which suggests to me, like Rob, to your point, she's going to be a player this season. Like she's not going away anytime soon.
Well, Dana, I want to jump to you and talk to you about Miss Selvig. They call her what? Kobelvig? They came up with that name.
Yeah, it was terrible. It's never going to stick.
But I think seeing Patricia Arquette and her character, especially in this episode too, right? All of a sudden, they make it seem like she's getting promoted, but it's almost like I don't think it's a promotion. I mean, she doesn't really care for this advisory council that they're creating all of a sudden. And yeah, I mean, I know you had made a note about her possibly becoming a whistleblower. Where do you think we're headed with her?
I mean, I think they have betrayed her in a way that she is not willing to forgive. Obviously, season 1, she took a lot of it into her own hands, as far as we can tell, right? Like, we don't know. Maybe we'll find out it was all their directive. But, she is the way that she wanted that apology and like eked it out of them, and that's all she got out of them, and then she gets the fake promo. I just like, again, Patricia Arquette, the acting in this episode I think is of the two we've seen this season so elevated, because the seething anger but having to like smile and nod, and again the corporate performative nature of it, I was just like, ooh, she is angry, and she is so angry that I think she is finally going to lash out, and I would actually say the same for Milchek, because he, there's a moment where he's like maybe giving Mark more info than he should, and it's like, is it to manipulate him, or is it to manipulate him for Lumon's benefit, or to like some sort of revolutionary moments? So I think we are going to see middle management.
But go ahead. I'm going to say,
but I think we're going to see like middle management in this scenario become more impactful than they've had an opportunity to be before, because I think she's done. Cobell's done with them, and so I could see her trying to enact her revenge using her little innie puppets.
But she knows something. Right?
Oh, she clearly knows a bunch of stuff, or you would have let her go completely.
The way it ended too, right? With her just
she knows about the pineapples.
She does know. I mean, Mark S says, is Gemma alive, or do you know something about Gemma? Something like that. I mean, the look on Patricia Arquette's face as she's portraying Miss Cobell's internal angst was pretty spot on. And so she definitely knows some stuff. And I'm desperate to know what that stuff is.
Did anyone else kind of feel like that was a look of slight guilt? Like she wanted to actually help him,
That's why I'm saying whistleblower. Maybe her morals finally kicked in.
Yeah. She's scared.
I don't actually think her morals kicked in. I should just be clear. I think it's a selfishly motivated revenge, but I respect it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait, did we talk about, I know I brought it up, but Cold Harbor, did we finish that? Did anybody else give a theory on what they thought? What is Cold Harbor?
It's not a theory, but I do have another question. Why is Mark so important to Cold Harbor?
Yeah.
Why, of anyone else that's ever worked on this project, do they have to have Mark S back? I mean, like, Dylan was on it. He was going crazy because he wanted all the incentives, and everybody else. Is it just because he's, like I asked last episode, is it because he's just that good at his job? I mean, what is it about Mark that makes him so special to this project? So I'm kind
Wait,
of just like, yeah,
doesn't Mark have a higher position than the other three?
he
Isn't he kind of
does.
right?
Yeah.
Isn't
hmm
he like the team leader or something?
But why? Like, what about him, and what is he doing that's different than everybody else? I guess because all we're seeing is numbers going into a waste bin or whatever that box is or something like that. But I'm like, I guess it goes back to what the hell Cold Harbor is to begin with, but they're accommodating every of Mark's needs. I want my old team back. You got your team back. We're gonna fire Bob Alaban because you want your team back. We have to have you back. They keep talking about this. I think Helly and the board also were talking about how important he is to all of this. So I'm just kind of like wondering, what is it about Mark S? What makes
Gemma and Miss
Adam Scott so
Casey?
special? Yeah.
Gemma and Miss Casey? I don't know.
I have to say, I spent the first season assuming that the work they were doing was just like that they were lab rats, and that it was just something to pass the time and keep them entertained. And it was some sort of larger experiment. And with the introduction of knowing that there are other offices, which I know y'all talked about last episode, and that there's this secret Cold Harbor project, now I'm like, oh, they are actually potentially doing something down there that nobody wants them to know what they're actually doing. And nobody wants, the innies can't know what they're actually doing, and the outies can't know what they're doing. So I'm like, this is nefarious. Tell me more.
Yeah. And if we Cold Harbor as literally what that means, not literally would mean a harbor that is cold. But the Battle of Cold Harbor, my very limited understanding of American history, is that it was a battle during the American Civil War. And it's known as a very lopsided battle between, I think, General Ulysses S. Grant's Overland Campaign versus, I guess, the Confederates, or I'm not really sure, but
I didn't even know it was a battle until you just said that.
Yeah,
I feel
looked
terrible.
it up the other day because I'm like, what does Cold Harbor mean? Like, to me, Cold Harbor means when I'm in the city in Sydney and the harbor's really cold. But that's probably not what it's about. Is that it could just be a complete red herring, because that's what they love to do, that as well, put us on all these little avenues where we're trying to decipher what something means. But if they are invested or involved in something nefarious, which could be military, it could be AI, it could be pharmaceutical, whatever, Cold Harbor could signify a lopsided battle where one side kind of completely overruns the other side. I know what that means, but I'm just going to pin that and see what happens at the end of the season.
Yeah, we're gonna have to watch this unfold. What about some of our new employees? We see Mark W getting fired. We just saw the three of them in episode 1, and we thought, and we had this discussion too, last time too, that, oh, we've got these named actors. There's no way they would just bring them in for like a 10-second cameo. But where do the other two fit in? And do you think they'll bring Mark W back, or is this it? He just got fired. And it was such a quick scene too, right? It's almost in passing. Very delicately done.
It's funny for me, just I'm taking a step back. This is like the meta view of it. Forget those cameos if you're like, oh, Bob Balaban's coming by, or oh, Alia Shaka. Nobody has talked about the voiceover cameo from last episode. And I'm like, bring that back. Like, what a flex to be like, you know what? We're going to have Keanu Reeves do just like a Mr. DNA-esque voiceover. And then we're like, we're going to Bob Balaban do like an episode and a half. Like, this is just Apple TV and Ben Stiller and co are just flexing left and right. But I think we'll see more of them, because I want to know what X5 is, right? Like, what does that have to do with Cold Harbor? Does it have anything to do with Cold Harbor? Is Cold Harbor the war between the innies and the outies that's coming? Now that I know it's a civil war Severance. It's one of those things where I'm like, I feel like we are gonna see more of the world of Lumen, and this is so dorky, but one of the things I picked up on in the door interview is, the interviewer's like, oh, they make their doors in house, how rude of them, or how like entitled. I'm like, what does Lumen do? Like what are they doing over there that they have a manufacturing division and this macro data refinement division? Like what are they up to?
I think we're still trying to figure that out. Does anybody have a clear? I'm still confused about what they really do, minus walk around in white hallways to meet up with one another.
Don't forget that last season we saw goats and in a room being fed in a bottle. And if you saw the trailer for season 2, I think the goats are still something that we have to consider. I don't know, man. What the hell do they do?
They make a point of including the goats in the recap, which they wouldn't do if it wasn't significant.
Yeah.
Additionally, I feel like where's Lumen getting the budget for stuff like hiring Keanu Reeves to do a recap video in 3 days? I mean, like that's just no, but I meant like
that's a Ben Stiller question.
Milchick puts all of this together in 48 hours. This is a lot of work and a lot of resources that they're pouring into getting all of this together in 48 hours. Why are they lying to them about 5 months? How did they put this all together? What is it all ties back to what is it that they do? And it's really kind of maddening thinking about it, but I'm so curious. I want to see how this plays out. I honestly think that Mark W. kind of being fired is definitely grounds for another enemy that Lumen has made, and kind of just targeting them. He actually does scream at them, I'm going to, sue you guys at some point or something like that. So again, I asked this question in the last episode as well, but I do think that there's something going on with the second team of Mark S and them coming back with a vengeance at some point next, this season or something like that. Just theories.
Well, Mike, I know you. I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
I wanted to ask Mike because I know you really liked the interview scene with Dylan, and I feel like that scene brings up a lot of key things. One of which for me was like one of my favorite lines from the episode when the interviewee says you chose to circumcise your brain, and I think it brings up a lot of like the negative feelings that a lot of people have towards Lumen, and I think that's also something that's simmering that we're gonna see later of like the politics of this world. And so like I wonder if you had any other like thoughts on that scene.
Well, it's a funny freaking scene. I'm sorry. It's just like everything that they're saying there is just mad. Like how long have you loved doors for, like all of that. What kind of door would you be if you were a door? I thought that was hilarious. The deeper meaning behind that I thought about was just how this show really, showcases how corporate life is like, because that's something cult-like about the door company too, just as much as much as Lumen, and is this just a commentary on the working world in general, or are all the companies in the world that this is based in like this? Like we're one single mind about doors, we're one single mind about Cold Harbor. Your identity has to be tied to what it is we're working on. I love that kind of commentary. I think it's really messed up, but also just a really funny scene in general, and a good use of everyone who the two leads that were in that scene. So that's one of the reasons why that's one of my favorite scenes this episode.
There was just a lot happening this episode. So team, we have just a few minutes left, and I think something we have to really touch upon is Helly, because we saw a lot more of her in this episode and really saw the strength of her character and perhaps a side of her we didn't expect. I was impressed to see how strong she was, and that made me really question, is her any acting? Or is there any really and what is her motive and incentive? She did this whole thing with the media and apologizing and putting that video out, and then her analysis of what's going on between her and Mark S. And it almost seems like there's some conspiracy thing happening there too, where it's planned. I don't know. I think we're going to learn more, but I just feel like there's something very conniving to Helly's character. And I actually fell in love with her originally, but I don't know. She seems like she could be a little rat working over there too.
She proved last episode. Any her's a liar, like any her is conscious of the fact that there's like a separate narrative going on and is behaving selfishly for whatever reason, or maybe unselfishly, but like she knows things and she is deceiving the rest of the team. So both Hellies have questionable, storytelling so far.
Watching and studying the kiss at the end of last season with her and Mark S. There's just something kind of creepy and unsettling about that, but it's definitely something that I feel like she's going to be leveraging. I mean, like Milchick leveraged it when he was trying to convince Mark to come back and everything. So that's definitely something that I feel like they're going to try and exploit for their own benefit. But yeah.
Yeah, I mentioned at the top of the episode something that really stood out to me is, again, sort of the disgust that she has for the innies. And I think, again, we see like the people who work for Lumon, or the idea of like severancing being something dirty and bad. And like, is that something that's going to be a continued thread of? But I thought that was so fascinating that she has this sort of like negative reactions to these people. And then,
Yeah, I'm interested to see how it all unfolds with her. And then is there some personal vendetta with Mark S as well? That's going to be interesting to me. And I think they pulled out Rob L for a meeting, so it's just going to be us right now as we wrap up right now. I'm looking forward to episode 3. I really am very taken by, or very intrigued by, the Audi world. I also wanted to mention this earlier, if any of you caught on to this. Their outer world seems so dark too. Like, did you notice in their homes, even when like Mark S has to change the light, or he's got the fish? Like, yeah, you see this beautiful orange of the fish, but the rest of it is just so dark and surreal. We haven't really gone back into Dylan's home. Looking at even Irv, right? Like, we see him come in and out of the building, but whenever we see, I just feel like we don't see any light in their homes either. It's just a very dark, dreary place. So I don't know.
I mean, it's a world in which people are so, disillusioned that they're willing to sever their brains, in order to go to work. So I would imagine it's a pretty bleak existence, outside or inside.
Yeah.
I think one thing we haven't touched on yet, I don't know how much we touched. I forgot how much I feel like so much has happened in the past week, but we also are still dealing with Mark that's very much grieving. And, Milchick says to him, like, you mentioned at some point that you felt like you were being choked by Gemma's ghost. And so I feel like Blue also evokes sort of grief and sadness and all these grays. And so, like, how does this grief play into the rest of Mark's character development? How much does that play into his motives of what he's doing? I thought that was really fascinating as well.
Guess we're gonna have to see how this all plays out. Well, we're getting near the end of the hour. I'd love to hear from each one of you on what you'd like to see unravel or unfold in episode 3, or what are you most looking forward to? Dana, we'll start with you.
I will start. Yes. So I think it might not be in episode 3, but I would love for it to be in episode 3. There has to be some sort of confrontation at some point between the story of Gemma and Miss Casey and Helly, because Audi Helly is in a position to remove Gemma and Miss Casey, right? She is a powerful person, and if any Helly wants Mark S, then like Audi Helly might help out, So there is like and I hate the idea of this coming down to fighting over a man, but it does seem like we are in some sort of power play, because also Mark S has other value. But I'm interested to see the dynamic between like Helly's knowledge of Miss Casey / Gemma. Like, that's what I would love to find more about in the next episode.
Nice. Mike?
Yeah, there's so much that was left over from the first episode that made me want to, just excited to see what's going on in the Any world. So I know that most likely we're going to return to it, but we're also going to get answers about Irv being one of the few people to question the Night Gardener lie that Helly told. And I want to see if this comes to a head at some point. We also got Dylan being tempted by the Audi visitation center and everything like that. I want to see how that unfolds. And, there's there's so much going on in that first episode that we haven't seen payoff to yet. And then even in this past episode that we watched, really having Devin come into the fold and really kind of start to question, pick apart the Severance program a lot more. Maybe that's clearly leading to, you know, a larger role, as Rob and Dana kind of alluded to in this episode, for her, that we probably might see start unfolding a lot more in that next episode. So yeah, just curious to see how we progress from here. So much to see.
Yeah, I mentioned this last week, but it's struck out to me even more this week of how much of a dystopian world are we living in here? Like, there's a question of Miss Casey. Is she a clone? Is this a world where they clone people? Like, what are they capable of that we haven't seen yet? And I'm just a political nerd, so I'm so fascinated by the politics of this world and like again, how are people feeling about Lumen? How much power is Lumen exercising in this world to be able to do all the things that they're doing? To Mike's earlier point, so I'm really interested to see more of that.
And I'm interested to see the evolving between Irv and Bert. Because, right, Dana, it's like, whenever you see her, oh, because I thought it was so interesting. It's like they give us a little pop of Bert when Irv is making that phone call, and you see Bert in the car, but then that's it. And then there's also when Irv took out the note, right? We saw, I think, that their meeting place, which was a reflection from season 1 again. So I really would love to see what's going to be developing with them in the innie and the outie world, because there definitely seems to be a lot of connection with them too. And I was always fascinated by their dynamics. So, oh, this has been so much fun. This has been so exciting. Dana, thank you for joining us today and giving us your insight and feedback.
Thank you for having me. Praise Kier.
Yes, of course. We need to keep bringing Kier back.
I would like a pineapple though at the end of this. I assume I received one.
We will talk to our producers and make sure you get a pineapple plus a Lumen card.
And I would love somebody to show up at my door and ask if I would like a 20% raise.
That to me, yeah.
That's epic, right? And then, of course, my other teammates here, Shadan and Mike, and then Rob, who I think got pulled to go handle some of the goats, so we couldn't really see what he's up to. But thank you all for joining us again on Processing Severance. Again, send us your questions, your thoughts, your comments to processingseverance@gmail.com. But do engage with us on our YouTube. Leave your comments. Tell us what you think of our discussion. Maybe some things popped out to you, or if you have questions or theories, we'd love to hear from you. So thank you once again for joining us. Season 2, Processing Severance, and we'll see you next week.